So, what I want to focus on today is going over the animal behavior chapter. And yes, awesome. And so, I think it should be pretty simple stuff. Um, First off, let's talk about why behavior would be important. What are some of the things that behavior is allowing an animal or creature to do? I think one is that this allows a creature to obtain food. It allows a creature to meet a possible mate. And also their behavior, or a creature's behavior, can help to maintain homeostasis, especially if you're talking about a behavior that's in response to a certain stimulus. So you've got some reasons that the behavior would be important. Of course, just like anything else out there, behavior is under the influence of natural selection. So, natural selection. When we look and try to see or explain why there would be a certain behavior at any given time, the reason that there would be a behavior is because it's going to be based on some kind of response. So a behavior is always a response. To a stimulus. And that stimulus could be either internal or it could be external. Your book gets into a description of proximate causation as opposed to ultimate causation. As you study or as you attempt to figure out why and how behaviors or events happen to creatures, when you look at an ultimate causation, that's kind of really starting to answer the why an event occurs. So ultimate causation is an explanation on why a behavior occurs. It really helps to explain the evolutionary significance of the event. Whereas proximate causation is going to be more of a description on how the behavior occurs. This would really understand any kind of phenotypic mechanism on how this works. So in other words, like what is happening to the body as the stimulus is being responded to. Okay. What we're going to do is we're running through like this tremendous amount of vocab. The first is a fixed action pattern. And that is a sequence of events. And these events are unlearned, and they're innate, which means that there's something that you're built with. And they're unchangeable. And this is the type of event that once it has begun, so once initiated, it runs to completion. I think the example that your book uses is that there's these types of fish out there, and I forget the names of them specifically, but when these fish recognize that there is, or when they notice like another fish in the neighboring area, in the near area, and the other fish have a red underside, if they have like red on their body, these certain types of fish like freak out and undergo, like they go through a behavior that is like a defensive behavior. Now, if you were to simulate this event, and instead of putting the fish with the red body in the tank with your fish that does the behavior, if you put like a stick that has red on it, the fish still turn to their aggressive behavior. So that's like a fixed action pattern, where once those little fish see red, they're defensive automatically, and they're defensive the entire way through. They don't stop. Okay, that's a fixed action pattern. We've talked about some other terms, but I want to go through them again. There's kinesis. There's also taxis. We saw those during the animal behavior lab. Kinesis is a change in activity. Whereas taxis is more of an automated response to or away from a stimulus. They do not move a lot. This is kinesis. Whereas taxis is a response that's to or away from a stimulus. So if they didn't like a flashing light, which I've never tried before, but if they didn't, then they would go away from the direction of a flashing light. So kinesis is like the activity level, whereas taxis is a specific response to a stimulus. Kinesis was how fast are those little bugs crawling around. They crawl very slowly in humid areas. They crawl very quickly in dry areas. There's more likely for them to leave it dry to go to a humid area because they move slowly in humid areas. Taxis would be they hate bright lights, so they go away from it. Or they like the smell of a Pop-Tart. They go to the Pop-Tart, whatever it is. Are y'all okay with this? I want to make sure we got this, because I'm looking out there and I see a sea of faces that are like not in the zone with me. So I would encourage you to really know this, because I got a quiz in about 4 minutes. Go ahead. By all means. Okay.
So taxes is involuntary?
No, taxes is always. Well, I mean, I guess you would say it's involuntary, but it's involuntary in response to a specific stimulus. A lot of time when we think of involuntary, like when you talk about like actions, like an involuntary nervous system, you think about it being not so stimulus driven. So this is involuntary in that the organism doesn't decide, but there is a stimulus that still acts on it.
Okay.
Whereas kinesis is just like activity level. Taxis is to go away from or to something else. So they're both all about, if you think about it, they're both about movement. But this is how fast are you moving, and this is kind of what direction are you moving.
So the kinesis is basically just person's activity level.
Like literally, are you going 4 miles per hour? Or are you going 50 miles per hour? And this you know what? Do we take physics?
Yeah.
Okay, this right here is, I would say, scalar. Do you know what scalar means? That means that it's just like I'm going 50 miles per hour. This right here makes it a vector.
Okay.
Gives it a direction. I'm going 50 miles per hour, but I'm going eastbound. I think y'all know what migration is. Do I need to go over what migration is? That's to go in and out of population. What else? What's another term for that aside from that? But like instead of saying migration, what am I doing genetically? Is that genetic drift or is that gene flow? Gene what?
Genetic drift.
Gene flow? To go in and out of population? Genetic drift was what, 2 examples? Right. Let's see. I don't want to talk about that. Ooh, this is a good one. We haven't talked about this yet, which is kind of weird. I believe I've mentioned this before up until this point. Pheromones. Have y'all ever heard of this before? These are chemicals of communication. Literally what happens is the body, whatever a body is, it will emits chemicals. In order to cause communication between creatures.
So are pheromones just hormones?
Yeah, but typically the term hormone means that it's going to be traveling through blood, and pheromones are just going to be traveling like through air. Like literally, I mean, this is like how one like male and female like communication, like the silent communication type of thing. That's an L, by the way. Learning. To learn. What learning is basically a modification of a behavior based on experiences. Now there's multiple types of behavior, but I want to talk about one real quick, and I want to talk about what innate behavior is. What innate behavior is it's basically it's a behavior that is developmentally fixed. And under strong genetic influence. So this is the type of behavior that kind of comes as a prepackaged deal with you. This is the type of thing that you would do, or whatever creature you're discussing would do, like all the time. That's why the term innate is, in biology, typically referring to something that you're born with, something that you don't really learn, you don't really acquire. This is just something that exists. If you think about it, it's long to change these types of innate behaviors. So, really, these are the types of behaviors that are dog barking. like the fact that they bark or breathing. You really can't like learn how to do that differently, you know. It's got to be something that's essentially unchangeable if you wanted to think about it from that way.
Can't learn how to do that unless that is
Like breathing, that would be innate. Something that is like built in with you, that came packaged with you with your program. Something that really can't change. Some more vocab that I want to focus on. Habituation, which is basically a style of learning. That results in a loss of responsiveness due to bad, or I should say worthless maybe, stimuli. An example that your book goes over is a bird that stops responding to another bird's alarm call, because that bird basically the bird that's doing the calling, like obviously there's no reason for it to sound the alarm. This is a little bit like the boy who cried wolf effect. Did you ever read that story as a child? One person, very good. It basically was, I think, along the lines of like the boy continuously lied about the issue. What was the issue? Do y'all remember? Oh, really? Oh, crazy. I guess that's why it's named that. Okay, well, who would have thunk? So yeah, so the boy cried wolf. Literally, he cried the word wolf, and he was all, but there was no wolf, I guess, is the moral of the story, correct?
Well, and there was, and then
No one, exactly, okay, good. Well, in habituation, there's really no wolf at the end. It was just that there was never really a wolf at all. And so the birds or whatever stops responding to it. Cool. It's like me talking, basically. People tune me out, you know, because they believe that I don't really have anything worthy to say.
It's like your car alarm going off. I would never think that someone's actually breaking in that car.
True.
I'm
Good
just
point.
being annoyed.
So by habituation, you've learned that car alarm is basically not worth listening to, or is conveying no information to you. Very good. Imprinting. When you think of that term, imprinting, you kind of think of I don't know, something that's pretty much static once you put it in the mind of an individual. And it is true. It is a behavior with both innate as well as learned components, and is typically considered irreversible, which means it really obviously cannot be undone. And it occurs during a sensitive period, so there's going to be learned during sensitive period. A good example, and I think your book even shows a couple pictures of this, would be like how little baby geese, how young geese like recognize that it's like that their mom is their mom, and they follow around the mom for however many weeks it is. So if they were, so that there's kind of the innate behavior in that they realize that when they're birthed, they need to look for mom. They know that innate, like there should be a mother figure there. The learn part though is that they learn like who mom is. They learn like that's because of a bad experience. With some other red reptile. So when we think of one feature of the environment, we think of, well, like landmarks again, and you're pointing up there. And I really kind of want you to see that associative learning necessarily does not have to do anything with spatial or cognitive maps. Associative learning is that you associate red with being dangerous.
So would it be like the same thing with like a creature was attacked by a creature in the forest, so then it stayed away from the forest?
Yes, because they would recognize that that was a negative experience, or maybe they realized that there was a certain like height or level of the forest, like of I'm thinking of like trees, like up in the very tip top parts. There was something dangerous up there, and then they just don't. They associate going up there with something bad, right? So that's associative learning. And then I think if you've taken psychology, you'll spend some time talking about these next couple ones, or you have talked about them. There's classical conditioning. Have y'all ever talked to this before? Good. And in classical conditioning, this is where there's an arbitrary stimulus that is connected to a reward or punishment. So reward or punishment. Do it. So I think a good example of this would be like how if you were to feed a dog, and right before you fed the dog you rang a little bell, and what if you rang another little bell one day, and you would see over the course of time that every time you ring that bell the dog realized that it's time to eat. So what if you rang that bell like over and over, and then one day you rang the bell and you would notice that probably as you've done this over and over, their salivary glands have produced like excessive saliva, like each time they hear that bell, like their body gets ready for feeding, basically, right? Does anyone watch The Office? There's a better example with The Office. There's this episode where one of the characters plays like a Windows sound, a sound that you'd have like from the Windows operating system, and every time he plays that, he gives his other coworker like a little mint, and he does this for weeks, and finally so every time the sound plays, the guy holds out his hand for the mint, and then finally one day the character Jim is the guy's name, plays the sound, and Dwight holds out his hand for the mint, and Jim says, "What are you doing?" And Dwight's like, I don't really know why I'm doing this. And he said his mouth is really dry now. So that would be like a classical conditioning where like that stimulus was associated with he's got to have a mint. If I have time, I'll try to find that for you. I don't know. I forget which episode that is, but find it maybe.
Why would that be considered as a reward and punishment system?
It really could be. It could be really any type of. I don't want to say necessarily like it's reward or punishment. It's there's something that happens as a result of a stimulus. I don't know.
It's like an external source is like affecting you.
Yes. I mean, the book always phrases it as a reward or punishment, and they do the same thing with the next one, which is operant conditioning. I mean, I would just say it's either something positive that's received or it's negative, like received. I mean, if you think about it, like everything that happens to you is either good or bad. So like you could just say that there's an event that occurs to you that's connected to a stimulus. And the other type of conditioning is called operant conditioning. Which I kind of always remember as it being kind of like a trial and error learning. And in this case, a reward or punishment, like an event that happens to a creature, becomes associated not with an external stimulus, but with some kind of personal behaviors, with a personal behavior of some sort. Like, let's say that Annabelle realizes that every time that she gets all, Annabelle's my dog, that's little Tinkerbell, we call her Tink Tink. Every time she gets all upset about not having a bone, because she eats these massive bones like in a day's time, all she has to do is like go, she first stomps her feet at us, and it's really annoying, and then she'll like go bang on the pantry door. She'll just like crawl up it, and she realizes that once she does that behavior, that's going to reward her with Jamie and I, one of us giving her a new bone. So like she has learned like that's like like by trial and error, she realized that was like the absolute best way to get a bone, was to pat her feet at us, just bark, and then take her little 8 pounds and go run into the pantry door. And she's realized that that's the way it's going to work. So, it's something else.
So does this count? My dog does this a lot. My dog will like take the people and drag it across the house to like my room and
Yes. And that's because it's time for food.